So I saw a quote from Dylan Gabriel at his post-practice media availability the other day, and he used the word fiery. He said practice has been fiery, as you might expect. Goodness gracious, I hope so. And I am glad to hear that that is the case, because if it were any other way, that'd be pretty disappointing. Now, this ties in to what Dan Lanning said on what was a very brief Ducks versus them. Strategic move there by the social department, whose praises I have sung to the high heavens on this show with good reason. They are phenomenal. It's the shortest Ducks versus them since they began a season ago. It was 2 minutes and 25 seconds. I think it was actually just 2 minutes and 25 seconds this time. If you know, then you know. Anyway, so I think that that was a wise move. There were not a lot of highlights from this game. It is not one you want people to dwell on. Putting something out, I frankly would have been all right if they'd put nothing out. The way that it was structured, though, was, as always, very deliberate, and I think intended to showcase what the mood was around this game, which is some good things happened. This mostly stunk. And here's a quote from Dan Lanning in the post-game locker room. And obviously we don't get to see the entire speech because it probably wasn't very fun to be in that locker room while Dan Lanning was speaking to the team after the game. Probably wasn't a lot of fun to be in halftime. And guess what? Shouldn't have been. It should have been unfun. And I suggest that it was. But the word that Dan Lanning used, if you saw the video, was disappointed. He said, I'm happy with the result. I'm disappointed in the process. To be frank with you, I hope he said stuff that was even harsher than that, and I have little to no doubt that he did. That's the mindset you want to see the team take. So I'm not promising that Oregon's going to come out and play a better football game. I'm saying between a fiery practice and Lanning straight up telling his team on camera in the locker room, I'm disappointed in you guys. He's trying to fire him up, and that's exactly the way that it should be. So I like seeing that, and I hope that plays out on Saturday. We have seen Dan Lanning be a really good motivator before. You think back to the Colorado game last year, that pregame press conference, or not pregame press conference, that pregame motivation speech in the locker room, people can criticize it all they want for, doing the same thing that he was criticizing Colorado for doing. It worked. It worked really well, and Oregon put Colorado in their place. And hopefully, as Lanning says at the end of all those Ducks versus thems, who we playing next week? Oregon. When you play Oregon next week, better be better. And I am optimistic they will be. You know why? Because a lot of the important players who we're talking about improving are already proven guys. Johnny Cornelius has to be better. Seen him be good for an entire year and make himself into an NFL draft prospect. Josh Carnley's got to be better. Yup. Started at left tackle last year. Marcus Harper was actually solid. Poncho's got to be better. I know that he can be. I've seen him play better. Charlie Pickard had a solid game. We'll get to, why don't we just segue right into that? But a lot of those guys, the offensive line, it's a proven unit. They had a bad day. Tiger Woods has missed cuts before. Crazier things have happened in sports than 18 to 20-year-olds not performing up to their full potential for one day. So I'm optimistic, but definitely not. It's not set in stone in my head. Oh, Oregon's going to be better. Oregon's going to cover the 18 and a half points, wherever the spread is right now against Boise State. They're going to roll them. No, not feeling that at the moment. Haven't gotten to the prediction phase of the shows this week, but certainly I feel fine about Oregon. Not great, but I feel fine. And this game be a real measuring stick. If you see the same sorts of problems on Saturday as you saw last week, then my concern level will get immeasurably higher, or perhaps measurably higher. I'd have to think of a scale. So why don't we just say it will certainly go up. That parlays into this question. Again, YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, or you can become a Locked On Ducks insider. That link is in the description below to get priority access and all sorts of other perks. Hey Spencer, do you think Matthew Bedford will play against Boise State? Dan Lanning said he was optimistic he was going to play. When should we really expect him to play? And what does the O-line need to do to win comfortably against Boise State without him? Appreciate your time, Sco Ducks. So I think on the Bedford side, if he is healthy, you play him. There is no, well, maybe we rested. Like, I just watched the offensive line without a sixth-year senior in there who transferred in from Indiana this offseason, granted, but all the more reason that you need to have that offensive line unit playing at a significantly higher level and with as good a chemistry as you can have by the time you start playing Big Ten opponents, specifically Ohio State on October 12th. I'm not worried about UCLA. I'm not worried about Michigan State, barring a loss this week to Boise State or next week to Oregon State. I don't think that's going to transpire. I think UCLA and Michigan State both stink this year. But for Matthew Bedford, I hope he plays. I don't have any specific intel on whether he will. If he is healthy, though, I absolutely expect him to play. You want to get him the reps, and you want to play the best football game you can. I know Oregon's a big favorite this week. Guess what? Florida State was an 18.5-point favorite, and they lost outright at home to Boston College. Last year, Colorado went into TCU. They were a 20-point underdog, and they won the game outright. So point spreads are telling. It's a starting point for what Vegas knows you're capable of, but it doesn't ultimately define what happens on the field. You got to go out there and show it. And if you have the opportunity to put somebody out there who would have been starting if not for an injury, you absolutely do it. It is entirely possible that if he plays this week, we see the impact of that injury from week one and go, oh, okay, this is a simpler fix than we thought. Oregon can't survive an offensive line injury, unless Davey Uli maybe can get back from injury and get his name into the fold. He's been with the program the last couple of years and has been a solid reserve offensive lineman. So maybe he could provide some much needed depth. Maybe they could, instead of playing Charlie Pickard, maybe they slide Marcus Harper over to center and put a Uli in at guard if it comes to that. But if Bedford's healthy, you play him, and maybe they plug and play, and boom, the offensive line is better. And it's a combination of you bring him back, and that's how the offensive line was playing all fall camp with Bedford in the rotation. And then he got, pulled out because of injury kind of at the last moment, and that threw a wrinkle into things. And then you have a situation where, okay, it was a quicker fix than we originally thought. That's entirely possible. So if he doesn't play, though, they have to run block better. I mean, they just, across the board. You go look at their Pro Football Focus grades, nobody's blowing you out of the water. And that matches what we saw. The run blocking grades in particular were terrible. And that matches what we saw on the field. They've got to move guys out of the way. They have to be more assignment sound. And they've got to stay away from the penalties. It's just top to bottom. It has to be holistic improvement. There isn't just one area. They have to be completely better. So if Bedford doesn't come back, everyone has to win more individual matchups. Communication's got to be better. They had the chip block that turned into a sack. That can't happen. That just cannot happen. And I'm not privy to whether, Poncho should have been in that B gap when T-Ferg chipped him past Johnny Cornelius and, Poncho got beat to his right side. So then he slid that way, created the hole, T-Ferg chips him, boom, pushed him right into Dylan Gabriel. Like that sort of stuff has to be cleaned up. When you hear about chemistry along the offensive line playing a factor, that's the sort of thing that that people are talking about. So it just has to be holistically better across the board. Another name I want to bring up to wrap up this segment, though not today's show, we still have plenty more to get to, is Tyler Turner. So he played just about the entire first half, redshirt freshman, former 4-star recruit, did not play but for maybe a couple snaps last year, and he played the entire first half, and Tysheem Johnson did not play in the first half, and then Tysheem played the entire second half. Not sure what those rotations are going to look like. I would continue to look out for the name Tyler Turner. Was not expecting him, but certainly knew it was possible that he could see the field this year in that safety room. I said many times in the offseason, somebody with a freshman next to their name, a true or a red shirt, is going to play in the safety room. We saw that in week one. Tyler Turner could continue having a role for this Oregon secondary. I will be surprised if this is the last time that we hear his name or that we see him on the field. That's a guy who might have to step up big time for the Ducks in the coming games.